Hello there, everyone. I hope you're having a good social distancing and welcome back to school. And I will say that this is the first video lecture I've ever had to do where I'm just sitting here talking at a PowerPoint. So please bear with me as we go through this. But, this whole social distancing thing, it's a wild ride in itself. I hope all of you are staying inside and staying safe, happy, and healthy. And and I hope that we can get as much as possible out of the rest of this semester. So a couple things real quick as we're going through. You might hear some rumbling in my microphone. That's because I was so inspired by your Cats package that I ended up, after getting back from Oklahoma a couple weeks ago, went out to the Athens Humane Society and actually adopted a cat. And he is just sitting here purring next to the camera right now. Although he did just hop down off my desk. So, hey, maybe I'll even include a little picture of him. And there you go. So, without any further ado, I guess let's get started. We are working, if you remember back, I know it has been a long time since we have met, but if you remember back, before spring break, before the long social distancing quarantine break, we were putting together news packages. We had just completed putting together our Cats package, and we were about to start putting together a news package of our own. Obviously, things have changed a little bit since then. We're still going to be putting together news packages of our own, but they are going to be a little bit different than the original plan in the course syllabus. If you have not gone and checked out the new syllabus with the new grades, you should check that out. Also, make sure you check out the new class calendar, as it will give you updated. Hi, buddy. Sorry, my cat just jumped back up on the desk. Because it will also give you new versions. The new class calendar will also give you new information about due dates and about what days I will be posting video lectures. So I encourage you to go check that out. It's all on ELC, both the new syllabus as well as the new class calendar. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'll give you more information about what I'm looking for from the new homework assignment that I've created near the end of this video, and then also the assignment sheet should be posted on ELC by the time this finishes uploading to YouTube. So without any further ado, let's get going. And here we go. All right, so I think it is a little simplistic to say at this point that every news story, whether it's a print story or a video story, it needs to tell or to answer the basic news questions of, every print story or every story. So, and of course, those questions are, oh, my bad, my cat jumped on my keyboard and he advanced the slide. Yeah, so we have to answer the basic questions about every news story, the who, what, when, where, why, how. All of that should just be second nature to you at this point in your journalism program. So let's actually get into how we are going to answer those questions, because it is a little bit different than a print news story. We are not just simply writing a shopping list of answers. That is not how we should think about this. Of course, that's not how you should think about it in a print story either. Instead, we are crafting a compelling visual story through which these answers should be slowly revealed over time, or over a minute 45 or so of the news package. So our goal as video reporters are not just to blanket answer these questions, but to actually take us inside of an event or inside of an issue and show us the real impact of the story on the people who are there, or on the people's lives who are affected by whatever issue you are covering. It is a really common mistake for students to basically just write a print story and have just random video accompanying it. And what I mean by that is, when you're writing a print story, you really are doing it in a completely different style. And we'll talk a little bit more about the style for print compared to the style for video in a second. But just think, if you're writing something for the internet, that is not how you would write a video script. And, vice versa. You wouldn't write a video script for print publication. So just simply writing a news story in the way that maybe you've been trained to do it before and throwing some video onto that. That's really not what we're looking for here. That is wrong. Instead, a video news story is its own thing. It has its own style and its own set of rules. So let's dive in a little bit more into that and talk about the differences between writing for news, for video news, and writing for like print news or, magazine journalism of some kind. So basically, the biggest difference is obvious. The audience is not going to be reading your story, which means you can't have a lot of complex sentence structure. You can't have your story can't be confusing at all, really, for the audience, because they only get one pass at it, and they're probably not going to rewind to be like, hey, hold up, wait a second. What did they say? Let me rewind. Don't expect any audience member to do that. Also, you're going to have to use smaller words traditionally because your audience is going to be hearing your story, not reading it. So we're going to specifically talk about writing for the ears and not for the eyes. Think about it as it's just a spoken word conversation between you and your audience. It's going to be formal yet relaxed and conversational. I mentioned before the break that a good rule of thumb is try to think about writing for video news as if you're writing a story to be read to your mother. It's both formal yet conversational. So in print news, and this is, one of the big differences between print and video journalism. In print news, we use what's called the inverted pyramid. And I know that you have all taken the kind of intro to, news writing class at this point. So you hopefully should know what the inverted pyramid is. But for those of you who may want a refresher, when we're talking about the inverted pyramid, we are specifically talking about the style in which you write for print news. You put the most important information at the top, the next most important information after that, and so on and so on and so on. Why do you do this? Because at any moment you know that your reader may stop reading and move on to the next story. So you want to make sure that they are getting all of the required information as quickly as possible. Often you want them to be able to get the gist of your story and answer a lot of those who, what, when, where questions right there in the first sentence, which of course is called a lead in print journalism. So that's the basic style for print journalism. But how is that different from video? What is the style for video? Well, instead of a inverted pyramid style, we're going to be talking about video news writing as much more cyclical, and it works much more in a circle where your story is going to come full circle. It's going to make a full arc and kind of end where it began. And don't worry, I'm going to get into this in the next couple slides. Sorry. You will notice that the best stories that you view are presented in a very specific way. And also, they don't just make the story about the event or the issue, but they instead make the story about people who go to the event or people who are affected by the issue. The best video news stories are about people. They, of course, provide good relevant data. They put that data in context, though, and specifically in the context of how it is impacting the people who were there. And then finally, they wrap up with a very clear conclusion that you'll notice often ends where it began. It ends by talking about how the people that it introduced at the beginning of the package it ends by talking about how the people who are introduced at the beginning of the package are impacted and how they have resolved whatever issue comes to light. So let's think of a example here of a story that goes full circle. Let's just say that the social distancing is over and Athens throws a big "we're no longer in quarantine" package. Well, the story, a big "we're no longer in quarantine" party. I know that that's not going to happen, and it would probably be pretty irresponsible if it does, because even after the social distancing ends, we're probably going to have to stay away from super large gatherings for a while. But let's just pretend in this hypothetical situation that after the social distancing is over, Athens throws a big, we're at a quarantine party. Congratulations on surviving the pandemic. So instead of, if you were going to make a news package about this party, instead of just showing up at the event and, say that there's a concert and there's good food and there are like yard games, instead of just showing up at the event and recording a couple of these random like party activities, I mean, that's one way to tell the story, but it's not the real story. The real story is about the people who are attending the event. So you might try to find a specific person. You want to talk to them, and you want to introduce them by talking to them about their quarantine life. You want to talk to them about like what, why they were afraid of the pandemic, what they needed, what they did to prepare for it, how they made it through the time. And so you've introduced them like that. Then you want to dive into about how the quarantine or how, the coronavirus impacted Athens. You want to give good, relevant data about, honestly, unfortunately, probably about how many people were hospitalized and how many people died here in Athens, as well as probably the larger issue of Georgia. It's a very unfortunate issue, but you would want to provide the data about how Athens fought it off, how I will say I think Athens has done a pretty good job at the whole social distancing thing. We kind of led the way in Georgia as well as in much of the South, and I think Athens is doing great. So you might kind of talk about how the local government really kicked it into gear. Or if Athens is failing in some ways, you might talk about that as well. But you're talking about this in the context of the people you originally introduced, and then let's say these people go to this party. You don't just simply say that, oh, there were fun and games, there was a concert, it was fun time had by all. No, talk about why this is important, why this is needed, and then you'd want to finish up by probably going back to the original characters that you introduced at the beginning of your news package and have them talk about why this moment, this celebratory moment, has been so helpful and impactful for them. That way you end pretty much where you began with the characters that you introduce. You start to get a kind of a picture about that circular kind of form of writing where you kind of come back to the beginning by talking about how your characters, your specific people that you have introduced really are impacted by your story. And we'll move on. So, as I said, the best news stories are about people, real people who are affected by whatever issue you're covering. I typically like to think of them as characters in a dramatic story. It's just, in this case, we're not talking about fiction, but it's still kind of okay to make them up as real world characters. They think of this as a little mini documentary, and these are documentary characters, so you want to tell their story. And then you can talk about whatever issue you were talking about by telling your character's story. Also, this kind of goes without saying, but if a news story is about people, then we should make sure that we get probably lots of B-roll about those people. So as you're going out and shooting, I'll go back to my Athens quarantine celebration example again. But as you're going out shooting, you would want to make sure that you get lots of B-roll of your characters at whatever event. That's not to say that you shouldn't get a lot of B-roll of just everything that's happening, but specifically try to get a lot of B-roll of your characters at whatever event or, that they are at. So I have lots of examples. In this case, I think these two examples are really good ways that reporters have introduced people. They've shown, they've told stories through the action of main characters. As you can see, I have my links in my PowerPoint. However, I'm also going to be posting the URLs to these links down below in the comments section, in the description of this video. I can't, unfortunately, just click on them and play them in this video because, well, then I would be playing someone else's copyrighted material in my video, and YouTube might take some offense to that, as well as it's just not a okay thing to do, to post copyrighted material inside of your own videos. So I am just going to link to the URLs to these examples. And it's not just these two examples, but all the examples that we go through as we go on. But I encourage you to pause this video, open up the example 1 and example 2 in the description below in new tabs, watch them, and then come back to this video. All right, so after introducing your main characters, and I really hope you did watch those 2 videos. I think they do a really good job at introducing characters. But after you introduce the main characters, you will find that most video news stories start by introducing how those characters are impacted by an issue, or they provide relevant data about an issue which those characters are maybe involved in. So ways that this data can be introduced can be through interviews by either your characters, or maybe better yet, by an expert. And this data should help explain basically what the main characters of your story are dealing with. You should really think about this part as the main meat of your story, where a lot of the information is given. I have another really good example that I encourage you to, once again, this should be example 3 in the description. I encourage you to open it up in a new tab and check it out. I think they do a really good job at giving lots of good data through their character work. And of course, once that main issue is introduced with within the story will begin to start linking back and talking about how the issue is impacting those main characters. And basically what they're doing here is just giving the story more context, showing how it impacts real-world people. Remember, you are telling an actual story. You're not just simply providing a list of facts. So that's why we want to constantly be talking about how whatever issue we're dealing with, or whatever the main point of our story is, how it is impacting real world people. And that's, we can do that through interviews, we can do that through our voiceover, but this is an important part. We are giving context why whatever issue we're talking about is important. It's important because it affects people. And of course, how does the issue you are covering impact the story being told through the main character's eyes? I really love it when reporters show that an issue is a problem and they show that through the characters that they introduce. An example of that would be say UGA sold out of parking spaces this past year, right? So let's say you find a student who tried to buy a parking space but just couldn't. And so you can interview them about the issue of, the lack of parking on campus. And this is a real issue. It's a real story, but you're telling the story through the eyes of this main character who now has to adapt and improvise to not being able to park on campus. How are they going to do that? And that gives great context to the story. Again, I've got a really cool example. I encourage you to open it up. This would be, example number 4, and you should open it up in a new tab and check it out. And then finally, every good news package has a clear and compelling ending featuring strong audio and strong visuals. B-roll should be accompanied by reporter narration and possibly a short, compelling soundbite. I think the big thing here is that we want to come full circle and talk about those main characters that we introduced at the beginning and how they have been impacted by the issue that you have told. I think it's always good when the audience is persuaded by the conclusion to continue thinking/caring about whatever issue we're talking about. So, I think because you cannot tell the full story in just a minute and a half of video, I wish you could, but it's not really feasible for the vast majority of stories. So oftentimes your main goal isn't necessarily to give them 100% of the information, but instead it's to give them the information they need and to persuade them to continue to care about the issue so that maybe they will go and search out more information about it, either right after watching your video or at a later time. But you want them to continue to care about the issue, continue to care about the characters. So I usually try to write my conclusions in a way that persuades them to keep thinking about the issue. All right, we have a general outline of how our stories take shape. We're going to talk, we have, the whole cyclical style where we start out introducing our main characters. We give a little bit of context, we introduce the issue and then give context about how it's impacting our main characters, and then we finish up by talking about, kind of the conclusion, but again, we do a conclusion in the context of the main characters and how they have dealt with the issue at hand, or how they are planning on dealing with the issue at hand. Even if they really don't know, it can be a conclusion itself to say they don't know what they're going to do. So with that basic kind of circular writing style in mind, let's actually talk about the writing itself. So, very important when you're writing for video is to be clear and to be concise. Keep in mind that we have just about 1.5 to 1:45 seconds to tell everything that they have to know about the story. That means that we have to do it very, very quickly. So you may find yourself writing something, and then you might have to just take a step back and think, okay, I've written 2 sentences. How can I say what I just said in 2 sentences? How can I say that in fewer words? How can I say those 2 sentences in 1 sentence? Is there a way I can be more concise? Is there a way I can be more clear? You should be constantly asking yourself those questions as you go through the writing process. This example is example number 5 in the description below. I highly, highly recommend watching it. He does a very, very good job at really going over how he writes his stories. It's this like Reporter 101 training thing. I really, really recommend it. If you don't watch any other example video, which I certainly hope you are, but if you don't watch any other example video, this is the one that I most recommend. So again, open it up in a new tab and watch it, and then come back to me when you're done. All right, I have 5 big tips for writing the story. The first big tip is know your video. We're going to come back to each of these, but the outline is know your video, understand the theme and structure, use active voice, be conversational, and use the touch and go method of writing. It's okay if you don't know what those are at the moment. We are going to go over them one at a time. So, know your video. I cannot stress this enough. Know your video. Keep in mind that the biggest rookie mistake you can have is to just simply think that B-roll is there to fill empty space on your timeline when you're editing. That is not what B-roll is for. B-roll is used to help tell the story. Yeah, it is an added bonus that it, fills empty space, but it is there to help tell the story, which means when you are talking about something in your voiceover, you want to be showing it in your B-roll. I can't tell you how many times I get video work from students and they have written a really good package, but their video really doesn't have anything to do with what they're saying. Yeah, maybe they're at an event or something, which which you won't be able to go to any events, unfortunately, just because of the nature of the world we live in at the moment. But, I've seen so many students turn in packages where they went to an event and they did a really good job writing a story that wasn't, that focused on the main point of the event, which is hardly ever the event itself, but instead why the event took place. For instance, whenever there's a fundraiser or like a charity fundraiser concert or whatever, the story is not the concert. The story is what is the charity and why is the concert happening. But anyway, I can't tell you how many times I've seen students come in and they write a really good story about, why an event's happening, and they give lots of background about like whatever charity the money's going to and what the important work that this charity does. But instead of having B-roll that's associated with the actual words that they are saying about the charity, they're just showing people eating hot dogs, or they're just showing people playing cornhole, and that video does not match with the audio that they are saying with it, what they are talking about. And you can tell that they are just using the video. They went to the event, they shot a lot of B-roll, and now they are just using the video that they have to fill the empty space in their timeline. And they're not really thinking about, hey, is my video the best video I can take for what I'm saying here in the story? And by all means, sometimes you do just have to fill an empty spot with some random B-roll. That, I get it. It happens. But the biggest rookie mistake I see is doing that constantly, where you just, you go out, you shoot some video. Yeah, it's at least better than black video, right? So I'm just going to add it on and put it over my voiceover and just be happy with it. No, let's not do that. Let's purposely think, hey, what is the best video I can place over this section of my VO? And if that means going out and shooting additional video, that might mean going out and shooting additional video. Obviously, right now, we're kind of quarantined, so I'm going to be a little bit more lenient about that in your upcoming assignments because, well, I do not want you all to break social distancing. I really don't want you to have to go outside for this, for any assignments for the rest of the semester. In fact, we have been asked by Grady not to count off points if we think our students are not maintaining proper social distancing. So keep that in mind. I understand that, video is going to be a little bit harder to come by for our assignments for the rest of the semester just because of the way the world is right now. But in general, when the world is not quarantined, we want to get video that best goes with the audio that we're talking about, the VO. Also, you should keep in mind, back to the kind of point number 1 on here, is that use your SOTs, and remember SOT stands for sound on tape, and we are talking specifically about interviews here, but use your SOTs to convey emotion. Your subject, your characters, unless they're like an expert source, which expert sources should give you information, but sometimes the best interviews are talking to people who were just impacted by whatever issue you were telling your story about. And they, characters who are directly impacted by the issue, they can give you so much more context and so much more emotion. So really use those SOTs to convey a little bit of emotion or in your story and to give your story some context. Also use SOTs from expert sources to present information to your audiences. I know I've talked a lot about B-roll, but of course we're going to be creating shot sequences. I still want you to do that even in the social distancing. And also try to think about nat sound. Let your natural sound do some talking for you. Sometimes the best thing you can do as a reporter is to simply just let the compelling audio that you take tell your story for you. Now, we are going to get into that more down the line near the end of the semester, where we talk about nat sound packages. But that is not to say that you can't let nat sound do some storytelling for you in a traditional news package where you have a VO. Again, I have an example for you. Check it out. Open in a new tab. What is this? Example number 6. So yeah, open up example number 6 and in a new tab and come back to me when you're done. So this point is pretty important for us as we are social distancing. We have to know that sometimes the story we want to tell is not great at capturing, or is not necessarily going to be the best story for video. What I mean by that is sometimes stories just don't seem like they would have a good visual representation out there. Think about a new tax increase. How do you get video of taxes increasing, right? Well, ideally, or traditionally, this is actually this is actually one of my favorite things when you have a story that, isn't just like, oh, I'm going to go cover an event and film B-roll of people in a park. But instead, where you have a story and you're like, well, I don't know necessarily what video I'm going to get. But that actually means I have a chance to be a lot more creative. So like, what kind of video would I get for a tax increase? Well, maybe B-roll of, government buildings. I know, say it's a local tax, you could get B-roll of the county courthouse. You could get video of, you're wanting to think about characters of main, characters, maybe receiving their paycheck and it not being quite as much. Let's just say, it's an income tax. They're receiving their paycheck and maybe not getting as much, or and you can use kind of visuals like that to tell your story instead of just, not every story in an event is a event. So, you may not be able to just go out and cover a event in the park every time. Sometimes you have to get creative with your story. So now is a time when I would traditionally like to, kind of toss it to you in class and ask for examples from you. But unfortunately, we just don't have that. So you're going to have to get creative on your own. But just know that even if a story doesn't seem like it necessarily lends itself to the best video out there, that doesn't mean you can't have really good video. It just means you've got to be a little bit more creative with it. All right. Of course, we need to really pay attention to the theme and structure of our video news stories. This right here is kind of that cyclical nature of the story that I was talking about. We're going to start out with in the beginning I love to show some action. I really think that the beginning of a news package is great for a nice natural sound pop. Think about the Armacats package where the very first thing you saw was a cat meowing. So you can think that is the action. And then it starts then the Armacats package introduced the main character right after the cat meowing. What happened? What did we hear? We heard our interview from Sai Nagula. And that was them introducing the main characters and showing us what the story is going to be about. Then in the middle of the package, I'm going to keep using the Armacats package as an example. We got some background. Why are there a bunch of cats to adopt in Athens? Well, because of Hurricane Irma. We had that interview with Jed Kaler about why it's important for cats to be fostered and how, this has been such a stressful time on these cats because they flew in on a plane and, well, cats are pretty stressful. They stress out really easily. And then finally we ended by telling the viewers how they could foster a pet, how they could adopt a pet, and then ending by Sai talking about, his cat experience, and the formula came full circle. So try to put your packages together using kind of that same basic theme and structure. I have another example. I think this is example number 7, although at this point I'm starting to lose count, so forgive me if I am wrong. But again, go ahead, go to the next hyperlink in the description, or go to the next link in the description, open it up in a new tab, take a look, and then come back here when you're done. We're going to be using active voice when we're writing a story. What do I mean by active voice? Well, kind of a trip back to grade school grammar classes, but we are having the action or the actor in our sentence be before the receiver. So we're just basically going to be watching out for the to be verbs, which the most common example of which would be the verb was. So really look out for using the verb was in your news package. We're going to try to avoid the word was. I'm not saying never use it, but I don't really love the idea of using it as a verb. So what I mean by that, don't say that the suspect was arrested by the police. That's passive voice because the actor of the sentence, the person doing the action, is the police, and the receiver of that sentence is the suspect. Instead, we want the actor to come before the receiver. So instead of saying the suspect was arrested by police, we are saying police arrested the suspect. Does that make sense? I hope so, because I can't ask for questions in the moment. And again, we wouldn't say something like, don't say the dog was bitten by the snake, because the dog is the receiver, the actor is the snake. We want to say the snake bit the dog. This does two things. One, it is more appealing to the audience when they listen to it. And two, typically, active voice is going to require fewer words than passive voice. And we're talking about being clear. We're talking about being concise. So this is just kind of a general rule in most news writing. So if you haven't gotten in the habit of writing in this way, I highly recommend you start thinking about it more carefully. Of course, we're going to keep it conversational. Remember that your video is designed to be, your script, that is designed to be read out loud. Make sure the words flow. Oh, sorry, my cat just, oh, hey buddy. My cat just hopped up on my desk. He's an adorable little orange tabby. Hi, dude. Anyway, yeah, so we want to make sure that our words flow. We want to make sure that we're using... so sorry, I'm being distracted by a kitten. He's adorable. I love him so much. We want to make sure that we sound comfortable and confident as a reporter. We don't want to be stumbling over our words. If you find that you are stumbling over your words quite a bit, maybe you could think about... Sorry, he's sitting on the mouse now. Maybe you could think about rewriting your story, or perhaps just keep trying until you get it right. But definitely you don't want excuse me. You don't want to be stumbling over your words in your voiceover. And then, of course, I've talked about this a little bit before, but you always want to constantly be asking yourself, hey, I've written this now, but can I write this in a more concise manner? Can I write this in a way that's easier to understand for my audience? It can be really difficult to write both conversationally yet respectfully or semi-formally. So I mentioned this earlier, but a handy broadcast tip is to report and write in the same way that you would speak to your mother or grandmother. That way it is both relaxed and conversational all at the same time. And finally, the touch and go method. This is about how to write to your video. Remember how I talked about we want to be writing to our video. We want our video to match what we're saying in our voiceover. Well, how you do that typically is through what's called the touch and go method. Basically, we're going to write directly to shots at the start of a sequence. Let's remember about shot sequences here. So that means, let's say we're talking about an event. Let's go back to the example about the quarantine is over party in Athens. Again, that's not like something that is in the works, and that is not something that should happen, because we're probably gonna have to, even after the quarantine's over, avoid large public gatherings. But let's just use the hypothetical situation, and say we want to specifically talk about, we'll say the food that's happening at the event. That's not the most newsworthy aspect of the event, but let's just pretend there's a, we'll talk about the barbecue at the event. So you might want to, or you might just be talking about the food. So you are going to write your VO in a way that when you start talking about the food in your VO, you would touch on it with the opening shot of your sequence. So maybe a wider shot of a bunch of picnic tables and people eating. And then as your VO goes on, as long as you're still talking about generally the same thing, your VO can be talking about giving general background and other facts, but as long as you're still in that same shot sequence, you can keep using just shots of the food at the event. I'm not doing a great job explaining this, but basically at the start of your sequence, you want to kind of touch on the start of you want to kind of reference the video at the start of a shot sequence, and then kind of as your VO goes on, you can be kind of a little bit more flexible with what type of VO you have in the foreground. Excuse me, I've been talking for a while now and could use a glass of water. But let's go ahead and move on and talk about reporter stand-ups. You may have a reporter stand-up in a package, but you do not have to have a reporter stand-up in your packages. I think it's important to make sure that you're not just doing a stand-up for the sake of doing a stand-up. A stand-up should have a purpose. And then also, if you do a stand-up in your package, I want you to look the part. You are a professional journalist, or at least you're studying to be a professional journalist, so you should dress like a professional journalist. That means don't step out in front of the camera in a UGA t-shirt and shorts. There is kind of a notable example about that, though, or exemption to that rule when we're talking about like the quarantine, though. If you're, for instance, do your story about life under social distancing, maybe it's actually okay to dress more relaxed, because you can be like, I'm, a reporter, and this is my work attire now, because you're, reporting from home. That would be an example of when it would be okay. If your outfit matches, or in a stand-up matches the, what you're doing, then that's a little bit more of a different story. But for the most part, as a professional journalist, you want to look the part of a professional journalist. So I said don't just have a stand-up just for the sake of having a stand-up, and instead have a stand-up for a specific reason. So let's talk about what stand-ups are used for. Typically, they are used either as a demonstration, where the reporter is demonstrating something like an action related to the issue, or more often, though, they're used as a bridge to transition the narrative. So maybe to move things along from one part of the issue to another. Also, lots of times people will use stand-ups when they are changing locations. So if most of the story has happened inside a character's home, for instance, and then you transition to an office building or something. I really love this video below. It's kind of just for fun. It's just a lot of really creative examples of very creative and borderline silly stand-ups. Probably a little sillier than you'd really want to go, but I really recommend checking out this video. One, it's just a fun video. And after all, if you've been watching me talk for the last, 45 minutes to an hour, you could probably deal with a fun video at this point. So I highly check it out. Open up that link. I believe it's example number 8. Open up that link in that I have included in the description in a new tab and check it out. It's a great one. So now that we have seen that video, and perhaps maybe that video has a lot of examples about what a reporter stand-up actually is not, instead of what it is best used for, but let's actually break down what I don't want to see in a reporter stand-up. A reporter stand-up is not just a look at me moment, like, oh, I'm going to put my face in front of the camera just because I want my face in front of the camera. No, that's not what it's for. It is also not a viral video, which, this guy in the video you just watched, he definitely had some viral video-esque aspects of his stories, but, that video is just kind of for fun. You really do want your stand-up to be an essential part of the news story. You want to make sure that it adds relevant information and that you move the story forward in some way. And of course, let's try to make your stand-ups conversational and natural. All right, we've talked a lot about writing. We've talked in the past at the beginning of the semester about interviews, but now let's actually talk about how you would record your VO. It's finally time to record your VO. How do we best do that? Well, definitely use a mic. Also, you can choose to record your VO directly into your computer. There are lots of programs that will allow you to do that. For instance, even Adobe Premiere, but also Adobe Audition, or even the free Audacity audio editing program. They will all let you record straight into the program. However, if you don't want to do that, I think one of the easiest ways to record your VO is to just set your camera down, and to make sure that you're using a microphone and everything, is to just set your camera down on your desk. You're not going to worry about the video. You're actually going to delete all video, all of the actual visual part of the video. When you get into Premiere, you're only worried about the audio tracks. And just set your camera on the desk, plug up your microphone, clip your mic to your shirt, and just record your VO. Just make sure whenever you do it, on whatever platform you do it, to watch your audio levels. Remember, we don't want to peak too high. Importantly, you don't have to read your script all the way through. Instead, record it in chunks. I think a really good example of this is that Irma Katz package, where she recorded every single line 2 or 3 times. And then when she got in the editing bay, she decided, okay, I've recorded each line 3 times, and I like, my first try from this one, my second try from this one. Yeah, she gave herself lots of options, and that's something you're probably going to want to do too. So record in chunks, record the same line a couple of times, but that doesn't mean press the pause button and don't stop recording. So instead, let's say you have a line like, I'm just going to read one of the lines off of here. You can instead, when you're reading your script, you can say, just read that line, pause, 3, 2, 1, read that line again, pause for a second, 3, 2, 1, read that line again, pause for a second, 3, 2, 1, read the next line, and so on and so on. It just makes it all easier if it's all in one file when you import it into Premiere. So I wouldn't recommend, constantly stopping and starting your record, but I do recommend recording in chunks. Keep in mind, this is going to be a heavily edited thing by the end, so you don't have to read the whole thing perfectly your first time through. I am including a script template on ELC. You do not have to write a script or for your news package. Then I'm okay if you don't. But if you would like to emulate the Irma Katz package, I am including a script template up on ELC. When I start writing, especially when I first started writing news packages, I really found it helpful to do it using an actual video script. So I highly recommend it, but I'm not asking you to turn it in, so just be aware of that. But anyway, when I am writing a video script, I typically start on the audio side of the page instead of the video side of the page. And so I will first kind of go through and think about... So I will first write my VO on the audio side of the page. And keep in mind, when you're writing your VO, you want to be thinking about your interviews that you took. I typically recommend writing your VO after you've at least finished all of your interviews, and even after you've gotten all your B-roll. Usually the VO is kind of the last thing you do before really sitting down and editing. But make sure when you're writing your VO that you're keeping in mind all of the interviews that you have taken, and remember the things that maybe you kind of flagged while you're recording the video as oh, that's going to be a really good soundbite. Think about where those should be placed in. Write your video around your soundbite, or your VO around your soundbites. And then after writing on the audio side, that's when I typically go back and I think, okay, where should my B-roll go? Now, what you've seen in the Irma Katz package, that was a finished video script. That's not usually how it starts out. So you could write on the audio side, and then what B-roll you've taken. After all, you took it. But you can kind of just go through and be like, all right, for my first line, I really, I'm not sure, I don't exactly remember exactly what I have, but I know I want a close-up of, person A. Or I know I want, maybe a shot of that person's hands working on that sewing machine or something like that. So I do find it helpful just to kind of go through and kind of do a rough outline of your video before you start editing, right after you've written your VO. And I find it helps a lot to help me write to my video instead of, kind of falling victim to that amateur mistake of just placing random B-roll on top of your VO. last, I do just want to say that, and I mean, I want to apologize because, I wish we were doing in-class instruction, but writing a good package script is not an easy thing. Also, just in general, going out and shooting a news package, even without all of the weird social distancing restrictions, is not an easy thing. And I wish that I could be more there than I am currently able to be to help you all through this, because it is not easy, and especially your first one. Your first package is going to be one of the harder ones that you do, just because you haven't done it before. So I just want you to realize that this isn't necessarily easy. I also don't want you all to stress out about it. We're all going to be fine. We're all going to make a package and, with the proper social distancing requirements, and we are going to get through this. So yeah, I just want you to realize that, like, hey, this isn't necessarily an easy thing, but please don't stress out about it. I'm here to help in any way that I can, and you will all get through it. So, to make it a little bit easier for you, I'm going to break it down into some step-by-steps that will hopefully help you get through the at least writing portion, although I think you'll find they're pretty self-explanatory. So, like, step 1, for instance, we're going to open our video after we've gone out and filmed our package. I recommend opening your video editor along with your script template, and kind of, because this allows you to, when you're writing your VO, to be looking at the video that you have taken. It allows you to see the B-roll footage that you might want to, write your video towards, or write your VO towards. Remember, you are writing to your video. You want to have them match up, so you might as well have your video open when you're doing the writing. So, yeah, and also it helps you make sure that your sound bites are what you remember them being. I recommend going pretty much in order. Write your opening first. Think about what some of your best visuals are. How can you capture your audience's attention? How might you be able to bring those visuals into the story, especially like maybe early on in your story? Think about that as you're writing your opening. How can you write towards those really good visuals? And then, just start writing. It's less intimidating once you actually, begin. So say what you need to say, and then if you can edit it down and make it more concise, just try to edit it down and make it more concise. Think about, the first couple, the first 30 seconds or so of your video as being the lead in your print article. You're trying to get a lot of the basic information out there, the who, what, when, where. After that, write the body of your narration. Give us a little bit more of the how and the why. Be sure to include lots of sound bites. Note the duration of the sound bites in seconds in your script. And a big thing about your sound bites is don't just throw them in willy-nilly. I know that I'm requiring you to have some sound bites, but that means that your sound bites should add something to your video and not just be there because I asked for them. And then finally, when you're writing your ending, make sure you come full circle and summarize your whole story. I always like to relate it back to my main characters. Just a general rule, do not end on a soundbite. This doesn't mean the soundbite can't be, in your conclusion. Just don't have it be the very last thing your viewer hears before the outro. Instead, maybe try paraphrasing something your interview subject told you. Or maybe you can add just another fun fact to help close the story. And then finally, you've finally made it. You're going to write that out cue. So after your last narration, your last line of narration, the final line of all of your stories should be, for Grady News Source, I'm, and then whatever your name is. What? What comes after the outro? Isn't that the end? Not quite, my friend. Let's talk about pad. But what is pad? Pad is simply... Oops, I didn't have a slide about pad. Pad is simply just a couple seconds of just B-roll at the end of your story, so that if your story was going up in a broadcast news situation, so that when the director calls to go back to the news desk or whatever, they just have a couple extra seconds to do that. So what you're going to want to do is just take whatever the last clip of video is. You're not going to want to cut near the end, but whatever the last clip of video is, you're just going to want to extend it maybe 3 to 4 seconds after your out cue. So yeah, just give it a little bit of pad. Some final tips, kind of to summarize what we've talked about today. You're going to shoot B-roll in sequences. You already know this. You're going to listen for good nat sound. These are final tips for going out and shooting your package, not necessarily just about writing, but you're going to shoot in B-roll sequences. We know this. You're going to listen for good nat sound. We should know this too. You're going to really try to start your B-roll with very compelling B-roll. You're going to try to start your package, that is, with really compelling B-roll and nat sound to help bring your viewer in. Please avoid panning, tilting, and zooming shots. That's not to say that you can't get shots from multiple angles and multiple zoom levels, but you don't really need to include that in your package. This one's big. Write to your video. I'm going to say it again. Write to your video, and once more, write to your video. Remember that your video should work with your voiceover and vice versa. This is a video news story after all. Let's not just write a print story with some B-roll tagged onto it. All right, and now what we have all been waiting for, your homework. So, your homework is to make a traditional news package. But due to the nature of, the way the world is, there are going to be some limitations to that. Very importantly, there are 2 things. Most importantly, I will say, do not break social distance. Now, what I mean by that is, don't go outside. You can go outside your apartment or whatever, but don't go downtown. Don't go filming on UGA's campus. In fact, I've been instructed by the department that if we think that our students are, not maintaining social distance while doing our assignments, we are supposed to count off for that. I love that as a department mandate, because I think it encourages just in general safe behavior during this time. We all should focus first and foremost. This is just, I'm not saying this class isn't important, but this is a video journalism class, and let's not, do anything dangerous for a homework assignment, So, most importantly, don't break social distance. So, with that said, since I'm asking you not to break social distance, I also am not going to require your story to be about something particularly newsworthy. I get it. If you are, stuck in your apartment, you may not be able to give me the most compelling news story or, newsworthy story. That is okay. If you need to give me a news story about your, roommate, or even about you making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you can do that. I do think a good news story, though, like a newsworthy story, would be just like how people are dealing with the effects of social distancing. If you have a roommate, someone who you are quarantining with or social distancing with or socially isolating with, by all means, you can interview that person. That's fine. About what their life is like during the time of social isolating. I think that's a great newsworthy-ish story, and by all means, you can give that a shot. But if you can't get something particularly newsworthy, don't fret too much about it. Just give me a news package that follows the basic kind of package formula. I still want to see that circular, kind of arc in your story, but it just doesn't necessarily have to be something particularly super newsworthy. Normally, when I am asking you to make a news package, or normally when you are doing a news package in maybe a professional context, you're going to be expected to get at least, and I'm saying at least, 2 interviews. But I obviously don't want you hanging out with too many people right now. We're social distancing, So I am actually going to drop the requirement for 2 interviews and say that I still want you to get one interview. It can be a virtual interview if you are socially isolating or socially distancing with a roommate. Then that you can interview them. That is all right. Also, if you need to interview someone and like record a video call, normally that wouldn't be okay, but for this, yeah, absolutely. And if you don't have anyone to video call or to video chat with, I can actually make myself available and whatever story you are doing, you can just kind of ask me some questions about it, and I can pretend to be an expert. We got to adapt. So if you can't find anyone to interview, you don't have an excuse for not being able to find anyone to interview, because I am willing to be interviewed by all of you if needed. But when I say interviewed by all of you, I mean virtually interviewed. Yes. So that is all I have to say about the homework assignment. The assignment sheet is up on ELC. There's also information about how to turn it in on ELC. We're going to be on the assignment sheet. There will be a login credentials for a Google Drive, and you are going to upload your videos, your final news packages to that Google Drive. And I should be able to access them from there. It's going to be kind of a rough system, and I feel I remember how difficult it was to get everyone on the same page about turning things into the video server. I have a feeling that might happen. If you have trouble accessing the Google Drive, if you have trouble uploading your video, just let me know. The key thing I want to express is that I'm here to help in any way that I can. Also, if you have any questions about your camera, about your equipment, about the lighting in your apartment, just whatever, I'm here. So let's make the best out of a not optimal situation and try to learn as much as we can and get some practice making news packages. That is all I have for you today. If you haven't gone and checked out those links that I included, you should definitely do so now. Keep socially distancing. I wish you all the best. Most importantly, more important than this project, please stay healthy, stay safe, and I will talk to you soon. Let me know if you have any questions.